I think I'm good. Yes, I am good.
Yeah, don't tell anybody.
Oh, that was nice.
Well, after a really long in the drum and percussion solo, Bruce and I come in on bass and piano, and we have to have agreed with not only where one is, but where we are in an 8-bar phrase.
Yeah. Wait,
So,
let's talk more about that. I'm gonna
yeah,
go out and
that's fine.
great chart, by the way.
Thanks. It's kind of an homage to Cedar Walton's Bolivia in a way.
Yeah, man, that is cool. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, this is my friend Geoff Stradling, and I'm really tickled to have him here because, yeah, well, you'll see why, because he's very entertaining.
I know you mean that in a good way.
I do. I'm just setting up my stuff here. Okay, here, that's good. I'm setting
Well,
myself
I'll
up.
warn our audience what I told you about it earlier, and that we may have an intruder on my end. He's sitting at my feet watching right now. Um, his name is Oscar Peterson Stradling, but I call him Oscar Pupperson.
Oscar Pupperson, I like that.
Tom Rainier calls him OP. And anytime I'm speaking in an animated manner, he presumes I'm talking to him. So he comes in, he wants to, maybe nibble on your ankle, untie your shoe, and then, so he may get up and be in camera. We'll see. I did put a toy down earlier to try to encourage him to stay on the floor, but I will probably fail. So anyway, OP, I think, is probably going to jump into the call here and have something to say.
I think that's fine. So, Geoff Stradling. So, I've known Geoff for a long time, but these conversations are cool because we actually have an
Yeah, you
hour.
and I go back almost 40 years, I would say. I moved here in 84. When did you move here?
76.
Yeah, so I moved in 84. By probably 85 or something, I was playing weddings, freelance along everything else we did to survive. And in those days, it was mostly freelance. It wasn't, an existing band going out and playing their repertoire. You were just called to do a gig and you'd show up. The singer would have a book, and the piano player, if you sang tunes, you'd have a book. And I started running into you on things, and we always had a good time because musically it was good, but we also both have zany senses of humor, and we just made sure we had a good time in the bandstand. Right? I mean,
Yeah, man.
that's all contagious to the audience too. If the band is having fun, the audience is going to have more fun.
Yeah, actually, that's how you run your big band, and that's
Yeah,
great. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. It's supposed to be fun. I read a great quote a couple of days ago online. I don't know who it came from. I don't think it was credited, but it was referring to the rise of a party
Yeah.
right now, and I won't say the P word. But the quote was just wonderful, and it pertained to so many things. And it said, "If you want people to join your party, throw a better party."
I like
So
that.
that is kind of how I run the big band and run the gigs. I try to make it fun. Try to make it fun for everyone. Fun for everyone playing. Everybody has enough to do. Nobody should go home feeling like they weren't featured or you didn't get a chance to do this or that.
Yeah.
And the audience should go home exhausted too.
Yeah. Hey, before we move on, I just want to say Beth Marlis is here, and she said, "It's great to see you. You performed one of my master's recital at USC back in 1991."
Oh my God.
She's a guitarist.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah,
That's the
yeah.
only, the only recital I ever performed at USC, so I
Oh,
remember it.
there you go, Bess.
It
And
was one and done. I was such a hit.
and then Taylor Hatch, my friend, he's a guitarist. He graduated from North Texas State
Yeah,
last year.
and yeah, yeah.
Yeah. First of all, let me say that that clip, I know that clip's old, but it still sounds fabulous. Why shouldn't it sound fabulous? And the rhythm section, so friggin' great, right?
Yeah, that's it was a little hard for me to see the percussionist on that clip. I'm on an iPhone for my Zoom, but it sounded like and looked like Joey
It is.
DeLeon.
It
Yeah.
was. Joey DeLeon.
So the percussionist chair has rotated a little bit, but since the very beginning, which is probably, I don't know how long I've had the band, 13, 14 years. I could look up, but it doesn't matter. It's just a long time. Since the beginning, that's been bass and drums, Bruce Lett on basses and Adam Alisi on drums.
Yeah.
So I mean, I had played with both of them quite a bit. I played with Bruce as long as I've played with you. It was kind of, in fact, you and I and Bruce, probably with other people,
Yeah.
did
Yeah.
weddings, 35 years ago or something. So I mean, these were just people that I click with. I know that they can play styles. I know that they're interested in playing new modern creative music and giving it a go and giving me their
Yeah.
opinion, because this it started as a kind of a workshop. It's a longer story. We can delve into whatever you want. I'm happy to talk about most anything here today.
Yeah.
But I was writing stuff and bringing it in, and some things worked great and some things didn't. And I'm not shy about rewriting. I've done a lot of that. But anyway, that's the only piece. I would say this clip is probably at least 10 years old because there, George McMullen is playing first trombone, and he and his wife Sandy moved to New York at least 10 years ago.
Yeah.
I'm guessing. I don't know
Yeah.
exactly.
I think the clip said it was 11 years old.
Yeah. So anyway, that's a tune that I wrote sort of in the early years of the band. I've been writing, all the time, always trying to find new things and new ways. And my whole idea about the band is trying to integrate many of the things that are a part of our jazz world, our modern jazz world, as I can into the jazz orchestra, because jazz, while it was born in America, has gone off and kind of populated the world. And there's all these different flavors of it. There's things with West African influence and Afro-Cuban and Afro-Brazilian and Asian. I mean, it goes on and on and on and on. So I'm just trying to find a way to make the modern jazz orchestra begin to be as eclectic as jazz actually has become,
Yeah.
So this was a piece I wrote kind of influenced by Cedar Walton's Bolivia, which is a really famous, great jazz standard where the A section, it's basically an A-B tune. The A section is modal and Latin, and the B section is straight ahead swing and has changes. So this is the same kind of thing. There's places where I come out of form. That's a whole another conversation about arranging, whether you're going to stay in form the whole time or not. But anyway, this is kind of an oldie but goodie. It is on the first and only album, our new album that came out in April, with the same tenor soloist. Kristen Edkins plays the tenor solo on the album.
That's the woman.
Yeah. Kristen
Edkins. I mean, I'm a woman, and I don't want to like overemphasize. Oh, it's a woman musician, but she's a great fucking player, and she is a woman.
There are a lot of great fucking players
in the band.
There's a lot of great players, men, women, black, brown, white. I mean, there's a lot of great players, and so
what's her last name?
Edkins, Edkins. Kristen Edkins.
Okay.
I have not. I will be openly say. I've said this before. I've not done a particularly good job integrating the band racially, and I'm continuing to work on that. But I've worked on integrating integrating the band in terms of gender, and I've done better at that, and have made it a point to look around our local community and see who I don't know.
Yeah.
So I've had the band so long that when we did an album we recorded last year and it came out this year, I didn't want to just use the people that have been playing the band the last month. I wanted to include as many of my friends as I could that had played on the thing. So I think there were 32 people on the album.
Oh,
And women on the album, Kirsten plays the fourth sax / woodwind chair and has 2 or 3 beautiful solos on the album. Barbara Laronga plays trumpet on the album, and she has a couple of great solos on it. Julianne Gralla plays bass trombone on the whole album. Lori Stunts plays third trombone on the whole album. And the primary percussionist is Kristen Olsen. There are 3 other percussionists that play assorted additional parts, but the primary percussionist on the album is Kristen Olsen. And now Oscar wants to get in my lap, but I'll discourage him for a bit.
Oh,
There he is.
there he is. OP.
OP in the house.
Okay, I want to ask a layman question.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not 100% layman, but still, I
A
want.
laywoman question.
Yeah, listening to the horn lines that you've written, being a pianist yourself, when you write those, do you imagine horn lines, or do you
Oh,
write
absolutely.
what you
Yes.
can play?
Yes. Regardless what I'm arranging or orchestrating, and in reality, I write more for a living than I play for a living. So I arrange, orchestrate, compose, conduct, serve as a music director, all kinds of things. But I always try to write as best of my ability in a sort of intrinsic or stylistic way that is appropriate to the instrument or the voice. So yes, if I'm writing a saxophone solo, I'm definitely trying to write something that is going to feel like a saxophone solo, but the kind of qualifier in that is when I started the band, I decided I was not going to pointedly write music to sell it to high schools and colleges and universities. That I lived in a city that had a lot of the world's greatest musicians, and I was going to write for them. So I was going to write at, as high a professional level as I wanted to, and it felt like it was appropriate for the piece of music. So I am happy to, when I do write, right up to the edge of playability. And if I do cross it, somebody's going to tell me. And I have things that were not playable that we don't play, or we rewrote, or I rewrote, or whatever. But so yes, I try to write things for saxophone that work for saxophone, that sounds like saxophone, but they may well be out on the edge and be something they haven't played before.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, so it wasn't really too much of a layman question, because
No,
yeah,
not at all.
it really sounded
will
like,
say,
God,
yeah.
man, wow, that's.
I played trumpet for a number of years. I played trombone for a number of years. I never played saxophone. I played flute for a couple of years. So I have a pretty good understanding of the big band that way. And I've been writing for big band since I was probably, I don't know, I would say 14, 15, probably 15.
Oh,
I started writing for it in high school. I'm gonna
that's
get
cool.
I'm gonna get a toy and put it in Oscar's mouth again.
Okay, I'm just going to keep talking. So Taylor
Yeah, I'm here.
asked a few questions too. He
Yeah,
said,
I'm here. All good.
he said he is also a composer and arranger, and he finds orchestration to be fun. Over time, has your process for orchestration been the same, depending on the setting and what kind of style you're writing?
Well, no, I would say it's changed. It changes in the style. It changes in the piece. Sometimes it changes in the client. I think first, a kind of a explanation of what is the difference between arranging and orchestrating, because in the greater pie chart that has composing, arranging, and orchestrating, they all overlap.
Yeah.
There's no big white line between them.
Yeah.
But in the absolute, I would say in the absolute pure, in both cases, you're taking existing music and you're putting it on the page in a new way.
Yeah.
In arranging, most of the time you're taking an existing song and you're revamping it into a new format, maybe a new key. You could be arranging it for a singer. You could be arranging it for your own band. You could be arranging it for a television show where, you need to have this piece of music for something. And then depending on whether you're arranging for yourself or for a client, for a paying client, you will have a set of guidelines of what you want or what your ideas are or what they've requested, what they're buying. Orchestrating is taking normally orchestral music that has been composed and is not yet on the page for actual carbon-based life forms to play it. And you're putting it on the page and trying to realize what the composer has given you in such a way that when it is played by the orchestra, it will best approximate their idea. Virtually all music that is written for media today, and by that I mean film, TV, advertising, video games, music trailers. There's probably other things I'm not thinking of. Oh, internet. There's a computer mock-up, a computer demo made of virtually everything now, and it's synced to videos so that the decision makers, filmmakers, producers, directors can say yes or no, and we like more like this, more like that. And then the typical orchestration process today for music for media is the orchestrator is given the completed piece that has been okayed by the client. So you're given the computer file, the MIDI file, you're given the audio files, you're told what the size of the orchestra is and what the the ins and outs are and various things, and then you figure out how to put it on the page to make it best approximate their demo. The composer may tell you certain things like it needs to be a little bit more like this, needs to be a little bit more like that. And then you try to put it on the page, manipulate it so that when the conductor's hand goes down, it sounds great. All of that said, now we're kind of back to the question, and that is, for me, it depends on the client, it depends on the project. It depends on the piece of music. I would say most of the time for film, the first thing I put on the page when I'm orchestrating a new piece, a new cue for film is I'll put the strings on. Because if you're standing on the podium looking out at the orchestra, the majority of the orchestra is the strings, and they're the heart and the soul of the thing. So I'll start by putting that on the orchestra. Oh, here he is. Here's OP. Let's show him your teeth. Come on. Here we go.
I didn't see the teeth. I saw.
Oh, well, you'll see them later. At the moment, they're on my right hand.
Oh.
Anyway, then usually next after that I would do woodwinds, and then usually next after that I would do brass, and then next after that I would do the percussion and the chromatic percussion, harp, celeste, piano, and then it would depend on if there are other things that need to be done. Now, if we just imagine that I'm given a piece that is very light on strings and very heavy on brass, and they're important, then I would orchestrate the brass first. It just depends.
Right.
Depends on the piece.
Yeah. Okay. It sounds like orchestration is the hardest, actually. Or I don't know.
Well, they're all different, and I love them.
Yeah.
I love them all. I mean, people say, "Well, gee, do you have a preference?" Well, and I always say my answer is always the same. I like a varied diet. I don't like to eat the same thing every day. I love orchestrating. I love arranging. I love composing. I love doing all these different things I do, and they're all. I was trying to explain to somebody the other day. Oh, I was getting a haircut. It was the guy Ricky who was cutting my hair, and I was trying to explain to him that they're different, but they're all pieces of the same thing. They're all interrelated,
Yeah.
And if you look at orchestration historically in Hollywood, many of the great orchestrators came in from being a fine musician, and often from being a fine arranger. So that as a arranger, you're able to solve some of those problems that if you were a strict orchestrator, you might not spot.
Yeah.
If you were a strict orchestrator, you might just look at the brass chord and put it on the page the way the composer had given it to you. But from an arranging head, you may look at it and go, I understand what they mean, but there's a much better way to revoice it, to move the notes around a little bit so it'll sound like they want, but when the brass plays in the room, in the studio, the whole thing will really sing, and the way their notes were on the page isn't going to. So
Yeah. It's really amazing, actually. Um, Taylor wants to know if you're a fan of drop voicings.
yeah, I use all kinds of voicings. I mean, I think in the beginning, when you first learn about sort of jazz arranging, you learn block. Block is the, it's the C major that you learn.
Yeah.
And that's just 4 or 5 notes, representing primarily chord tones within an octave, sometimes a note double an octave below, sometimes not. Drop voicing is taking one of those notes in the chord and dropping it down an octave in order to open it up.
Yeah.
Here's how what I think about drop voicing. It's really the same thing I think about block. It's a really great way to start to understand how to construct voicings. Block is a great way of learning how to construct close voicings. Drop 2 and 4, drop 3, drop whatever. They're really great ways of learning how to take your block and begin to open it into a wider voicing. That said, I do not use drop, or I don't think about drop very much anymore. I do occasionally, but most of the time, let's just say we have the brass in a jazz band setting. I mean, we're going back and forth between talking about orchestra and talking about jazz band. But since we'll probably talk about the trad band quite a bit, and you just played a clip. So, most big bands, you have either 4 or 5 trumpets and have either 4 or 5 trombones. So I have 5 trumpets and 4 trombones. So there's 9 voices in a chord. And let's say I have a tutti part that all 9 people are going to play. They're all going to play the same rhythm. They're all going to play, move along, maybe in parallel or something like that. I seldom think of the trumpets like this, and then I'm going to double in the trombones, or the trumpets and I'm going to drop 2 and put it here, and then I'm going to put that in the trombones. As a pianist, I try to construct a voicing for that. It's more like a 2-hand thing. Like, here's the trumpets, here's the trombones. I try to construct a new voicing for it that best reflects what I'm going for. And I do use block, I do occasionally use drop, but I try not to do any sort of rote or formulaic writing for the Strad band. I try to voice everything from scratch on the spot. I try to look for new harmonies and new combinations of notes and new ways to put things together that I've never done before. And my biggest rule for writing a new piece for the Strad band is I have to do at least one thing I've never done before, preferably a lot more of them. So I have to do things for each song.
Yeah.
I have to find things that I've never written before, or ways I've harmonized that I've never done before, or orchestral colors I've never written before, or chords I've never written before, for every piece. So that's why if you listen to the album, all 10 pieces are vastly different. It's 10 views of the modern jazz orchestra.
And yet, which is just kind of an interesting idea to me, and it always has been, even though you're doing all these very different applications, it still has your mark in it.
It does. It absolutely. I have a particular taste. I have things that I like, and it changes, and I have eclectic taste, and one day I might want to put the chili sauce on this, and one day I might not.
Yeah.
But I do have certain things, and I mean, if we were to do, sort of more in-depth, I did an in-depth kind of Zoom like this in April, right after the album came out, for the Los Angeles, but now kind of global organization, ASMAC, American Society of Composers and Arrangers. And we spent 3 hours on that Zoom. I picked 3 pieces from the album, and I went through them, almost an hour on each, really deep in the weeds of how I harmonize this and how I harmonize that. And there are particular things I do, the particular sounds I like.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, while I'm fishing for a new way to voice the brass, I might find things I don't like and go, gee, that's really ugly. I don't like that. But I may find things that I had discarded 30 years ago, and now I figured out how to do them. I mean, I'll give you a really great one. I'm working on, let's see, I think it was about the end of January of this year, around the same time that we got Oscar. Everything was done on the album. It was going to come out in April. I'd finished the Golden Globe Awards. I'm the music director on the Golden Globes. So that always takes all of November, all of December, and the first week and a half or 2 weeks of January or something like that. I'd finished that. the album was coming out, and I realized that I had cherry-picked all the best material to put on the album. I mean, really, there's probably still one or two pieces on there that I think are as good as the 10 I picked. But for the most part, if I ever want to do another album, I better start writing. Because I don't write one of these things in a day. I don't write one in a week. I might not write one in a month.
Yeah.
It just takes a lot of exploration. These are not like writing a normal. A lot of these are more like writing a movement of a symphony. They're very involved. There's a lot of counterpoint. There's a lot of modern harmony and decisions to be made. So I'm working on one right now. I'm working on a Latin tune that's Afro-Cuban. It's a kind of a sequel to the closer on the album, which is called Habanero.
Yeah.
And one thing I've been taught in school in jazz arranging years ago, and Taylor, you might find this interesting. I was taught that if the band's playing loud and you have the trumpets wailing,
Yeah.
you're always going to need the trombones underneath to support them to give you a full chord. And if you put just the saxophones underneath, the saxophones are never going to be strong enough to hold up to the trumpets. So I've never really done that above about a mezzo forte. I've always been conscious of that. I largely agreed with it. But what I love to do is I like to tear those old ideas up and throw them away and find a new way to do it. So I found a way to do it. I found a way, based on something I've been thinking about for a long time, I found a way to make the saxophones as loud as the trumpets. And it doesn't have anything to do with microphones. It's a really simple thing. And that is, this holds for the big band. It partially holds in other places in music, certainly in some orchestral things, but in general, brass are loudest when they're high. Saxophones are loudest when they're low.
Oh.
So if you have the trumpets up high and you put the saxophones right underneath them, saxophones are going to be too high in the range to be loud. So you can't have the trumpets too high, but you have to put the saxes down below where they're meaty and loud. Then you do that, and I mean, I'm not using it for a big chunk of the piece, but I used it for a couple of bars, and it sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
I didn't, the trombones are at a point where I wanted them to not play that and come in on the melody the next bar fresh.
Yeah.
And you know what? It sounds fine. I just had to find, getting a notification off the screen. I just had to find some way to do it. So that's something I haven't done before.
Yeah. Do you, I haven't studied your music enough, like all of the music, but how do you feel about using space? Because, I mean, especially with a big band, it's, a lot of players and a lot of music.
Yeah, I think you have to use space. There also the main thing is I think you need tension and release. You need space. You need in most pieces for the big band, you need room for improvisation.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, some pieces have a lot of it. Some pieces have less of it. It's very, very rare for me to write a big band piece with no improvisation in it. I can't think of one off the top of my head. Maybe I have. And I certainly am criticized for overwriting at times, which I think is valid. Although on the album we recorded a couple of pieces that have we recorded several pieces that have some of my densest writing. And we managed to balance it and mix it in such a way that you can absolutely hear everything.
Yeah.
You can hear things that were meant to be way in the background, and not fighting with the soloist, which is in the foreground. That's harder live, where it's hard to get the band to balance because the rhythm section and the trumpets are the loudest things.
Yeah.
So how do you balance flutes and clarinets to that? Well, first of all, you have to do it on the page. You have to write the piece softly in such a way that it's going to balance the best you can. But it's easier when you're recording. You can record things by themselves, and you have time to mix them and stuff. But yeah, I think you have to leave space. I think you have to leave room for improvisation. I think tension and release and pacing and form in a composition / arrangement are very important. And I'm not saying you absolutely have to write this or that in form, but there needs to be there needs to be a shape
Yeah.
to the piece in
Yeah.
terms of where there are emotional highs and lows, and where there's room for the audience to breathe and catch their breath and give them a moment to feel what you just threw at them.
Yeah. That's the
You know,
beauty
whether
of space,
whether
right?
it's something like just a simple chord, like Here in Spirit,
Yeah.
just starts with an A minor piano chord, boom, and it sits there for 2 beats at 60 BPM and sinks in, you know. And then there's another chord, and it just sits there for 6 beats, and very little goes on. So you're kind of telling them, you know, this is going to be a piece with space.
Yeah.
This is going to be a piece for that a lot of the time leaves you some time to think and feel and maybe imagine.
Yeah.
You know, let the music carry you away.
Yeah. What's the percentage of ballads that you use?
I put one on the album. I play 1% when we play live.
Yeah.
Um, I try. I tend to like brisker tempos. I think just because, you know, with the big band, I like not just the, you know, the softer textures in the ballad, but I love the excitement of it. So I'm going to use that. But I try to make sure there are medium tempoed things. I think for all the complex stuff, I try to make sure there's things in there that are not as complex. I try to make my set openers, especially the first set opener of the night, I try to make it not hard for anyone, because you know, the musicians got there, they got their instruments out, they warmed up, you know, all the horn players, they warmed up, and then they set the horn down, and most of them went to the bar and got a Coke or a beer or whatever, and then they're coming back and they're not warmed up anymore. So I try to start with something that's fun and it's energetic, but it's not hard for anyone,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know. And then you know, and then the honeymoon's over and we're off.
So Jeff, I don't know if I ever asked you about your growing up. Where'd you grow up? You said you started writing when you were 17, 15?
Yeah, I think I started writing when I was probably 15. I grew up in a small town in Washington State, about halfway between Seattle and Vancouver, BC, Bellingham.
Oh,
It was quite a small town when I was a kid. It was probably 35,000. Now, I don't know, it's gotten very popular. It's probably 80 or 90. I don't know.
yeah.
But it was a quietish small town in the Northwest. And my mom started me on piano lessons when I was 6. She started myself and my one of my 2 older sisters, Star. She started us both at the same time. Star's a year and a half older than I. So my mom didn't play a lot of piano, but we had an upright in the house, and she knew enough to start her kids on it for a year. And she said, you know, I'm going to start you on piano. And you know, after a year, if you like it and you want to go on, we'll pay for you to go to a real piano teacher, quote unquote. And I said, yeah, I like it. And I kept on. So I've been playing piano since I was about 6. And then I kind of ran through the piano teachers in the small town. And then when I was 13, my mom started driving me to Seattle every 2 weeks to the Cornish School. And I started studying jazz piano with Jerome Gray there, which was overwhelming. It was very tough, but there's stuff I learned there that I use today, and I use it as things, as harmonic things there I use in big band writing. Um, and he was very insightful. The very first lesson. So here I am, a 13-year-old kid, and we're in the first hour lesson, and he said, "You should be composing." And I don't know what
Huh.
he thought or what he saw. So he said, "Okay, I want you to compose a 12-bar blues head in these 2 weeks and bring it back to me." So that was really sort of the first push to, you know, you need to start putting notes on the page. And then I also, you know, I grew up in a house where we listened to all kinds of music. We had a stereo, and you know, I was born in '55, so you know, I can remember hearing Ellington albums at home when I was a kid. But my mom would play uh, Delta blues and folk songs, and then we were listening to all kinds of jazz. Listened to Dixieland and big band. There were Basie albums, and there was um, uh, 40s swing albums and pop albums and rock albums and all kinds of things. And so we, and classical music. We listened to everything, and none of it was elevated nor degraded. There was no greatest music in the world. There's no reason we wouldn't listen to Carole King Tapestry and follow it up with a Chopin record. It was all music. So this, I think, was a really important part of my musical upbringing, that I was exposed to all kinds of things, and none of it was compartmentalized or judged in a positive or negative way. So when I was probably 14, I started playing in rock bands, and in the beginning, in those days, it was Hendrix and Zeppelin and Stones and Animals and Doors, and then the horn bands came in, Blood, Sweat, and Tears in Chicago and other stuff. And by that time, I was playing trombone. So, with some other friends in Bellingham, we had a quote unquote horn band. It was called West Coast Brass, and we played high school dances. And but now, now I'm 15 or something. I've been putting notes on the page for a couple of years, 15, 16, I don't know. And somebody needed to write out the trumpet and trombone and sax parts. I mean, trumpets usually can figure out their part off the record, but what's the harmony? What are the harmony parts that the tenor and the trombone are playing? So I took that on myself, and I started learning to write, and I tried to learn things off of records. And in those days, you used to be able to buy a little book, not just the songs from the album song book, but the publishers used to publish what was called a sketch orc. So on a Chicago album, it might have a little sketch of what the trumpet, tenor, and trombone were playing on the thing. So that helped me learn how to voice that stuff. When I was entering high school as a freshman, there was no jazz band, what was called the stage band in those days. So I started one as an incoming freshman. We had it as an after-school class once a week. We met once a week, whoever wanted to come play, for 3 years. And when I was a senior, we finally got it turned into a class. And I, with the help of the band director, I picked what we were going to play, and I started writing for it, and I was terrible, and I just kept going, And then when I was a senior in high school, a couple of the guys that were in West Coast Brass, Rick Batdorf and Chuck Erdahl. Chuck is a saxophonist and lives here in Southern California. They said, hey, in the A band at Western, it was Western Washington State College. Now it's Western Washington University. They were both going to Western. They were a couple of years older than I. They said, hey, in the A band, the A jazz band, there's no good piano player. You should come up and audition. And I kind of went, what? They said, yeah, you should come up and audition. Bill Cole was the band director. You should come up. So they set it up. So I went up to Western one day, so probably in the first, week of senior year of high school or something, or 2 weeks. And I auditioned, and I got in the A band. There was an A and B, or maybe an A, B, and C in those. I don't remember. So now I'm playing in the rock band on weekends. I'm playing in concert band and marching band, and I have the jazz band after school. And 3 days a week on my lunch hour at high school, I'm walking up to Western and playing the A band there, and getting soaked in better players and a really good band director. So I was just kind of buried in music.
Yeah,
which is my happy spot.
Yeah, that's pretty intense, man.
It was really intense.
Yeah,
really intense. And then some point along the line, I was reading downbeat. I was a jazz kid, but I was also playing in rock bands, and the first improvised solo I learned off a record, and I didn't know it was a thing. I didn't know you should be learning improvised records off a record. I had no idea, but I wanted to be able to play it on the gig. So the very first improvised solo I learned off a record was Ray Manzarek's organ solo on "Light My Fire." That was it. I can probably still play it. I didn't know. Like I said, I didn't know it was a thing. It was just I needed to play it on the gig this weekend.
Can you play it still?
Yeah, probably. Is that you're right? That's over 50 years ago. Right. So anyway, I was interested in writing, like I said, and I've been reading Downbeat, and I saw advertisements for Henry Mancini's book, Sounds and Scores. And I knew Mancini because we had Mancini albums at home, and he was writing for TV and movies, and he'd written the first jazz scores for television for Peter Gunn, and we had the soundtrack, and we listened to it. Years later, I mean, decades later, I would find out that the piano player on the Peter Gunn soundtrack was John Williams.
Oh, wow.
Here's Oscar talking about jazz piano. So I asked for the Henry Mancini book, and they got it for me for my birthday or for Christmas. Then I worked through the whole thing cover to cover. So that's how I started to learn to write for big band.
Yeah. Did you go to a university after that?
I went for a little bit. I decided to go to this little college in Utah. I kind of looked at a bunch of different things, but I didn't know where to go. My parents didn't know anything. I was accepted to Berkeley, and maybe I should have gone there. I don't know. It's easy to,
Yeah.
go back and second guess your questions. But I went to this little school in Salt Lake, Westminster College, that had a good jazz program, and Ladd McIntosh was teaching there. And I liked his writing, and I'd be able to study with him. So I did there. So I went there for 3 semesters, and then I kind of had run through what there was. I quit. I was going to go to Northern Colorado, Greeley. I couldn't get in there. And then I was back. I was in Seattle instead of in Bellingham, and I was playing in R&B bands and trying to figure out how to make a living. And I was really, other than playing pop gigs, I was, at 19, I was grossly underqualified, really.
Yeah.
But I just kept going. At some point in the spring of '76, I was offered a gig playing with a band, playing nightclubs in Europe, and my friend Lance Burton, who plays tenor, and I went, and we both dug Europe, and we played with the band for a while. Then we both quit, and we stayed in Europe. And by that time, I played in the band probably 6 months or something like that on the road, playing nightclubs. We played in Germany, Switzerland, Austria, France, and Italy. So I'd seen quite a bit, and I sort of thought, well, maybe let me see if there's a scene in Germany. I went and checked out Frankfurt. It wasn't for me. I met three guys who were working in Munich and lived there. I moved there, and I lived there for 7.5 years. So I spent 8 years in Europe. A lot of people that follow me on social media know that I'm sort of a food and wine nut, and I'm always posting, cooking my stuff. And that's where I really was exposed to culinary culture, as also a lot of history and art and classical music. It was just a great scene. And so I was in Europe from '76 to '84, and I moved here in '84.
And so you were in your early 20s there.
I spent most of my 20s there.
Oh.
So I mean that was really my education.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, yeah, I learned some stuff about jazz arranging and this and that, but that was my master's in sociology.
Which is, of course, I mean, it's a mental game, really. I mean, of course, you have to have all your mechanics together. You have to do the work, learn, have your mechanics kind of spontaneous, but it's a mental game. You have to be a channel. You can tell I've been reading.
Yeah, you have to learn.
You
have to learn how to create. And I mean, I was really lucky. Like I said, at this point, I'm 21 years old. I'm an okay jazz player, but I'm a really good pop player. And Munich had an enormous session scene. And I was only there a few months, and I started getting hired to play on A records. And so now I was able to make a living. And so I would, this was the height of fusion. With 5 other guys, we formed a band called Head, Heart, and Hands, and we toured a lot and did 2 albums. So we're playing really modern, some of sort of Chick Corea-ish Latin jazz, but all our own tunes. And so I was working on that, and that's where I got exposed to Latin jazz. I'd never heard Latin jazz. I'd never heard salsa till I was in Europe, and it absolutely fascinated me. And I wanted to learn how to play these piano parts. And of course, like everything else, when you start, I was awful. I remember trying to learn to play a montuno and play the bass line, and I played it for another guy. I said, "Is this right?" He just went, "No." But I had people that helped me, and people that gave me stuff to listen to, and you start to find your way. And I mean that was 45 something years ago, and I'm still learning. I'm still learning about clave and writing in clave and playing in clave and how far you can stretch it until it breaks.
Right. Um, who are, I'm sure there's more than one, but who are a few of your favorite large bands, big bands, or orchestras, or
Well, I grew up listening to a lot of Basie and Ellington at home, and the era of this, I would call it the Sammy Nistico era of the Basie band. My dad was into, I mean, he had earlier albums from the 40s and 50s, but that kind of got him back into it. And so he was bringing home new Basie albums from the record store and stuff. So I was hearing that stuff. But the first album I heard that really talked to me beyond what my dad was playing. I used to go to the Bellingham Public Library. There was a branch in our neighborhood, but in downtown Bellingham, they had vinyl. And on the bottom shelf on one of the walls was jazz. I don't know, maybe they were 80 albums or something. And so I would sit on the floor and paw through them and look at them and decide what to check out. That's where I found Thad Jones' Mel Lewis Jazz Orchestra Consummation. And that album changed my life.
yeah.
I checked it out so many times. I paid so many fines on it. and then everything on there got published, so I could see exactly what he was doing. But his, I mean, it was the bluesy and the swinging stuff for the Basie band, but the harmony was more modern. It was chewy. It was fun. It was wild, and I just loved that, and I ate it up. And so that was really the first album that talked to me kind of directly. And so I would say the Thad Jones high tension voicing, which he got from Ellington, that stuff was an early part of my harmonic vocabulary, and it still is. And I've changed it, and I've evolved it, and I've found a way to make it my own. But there's things I've learned from that are a large part of my writing. I also loved Gil Evans, the stuff he did with Miles Davis, and the things with his own band, the Gil Evans Orchestra. And I could go on and list all kinds of other things, but those are really the biggest things. I would say the Thad Jones band and Gil Evans, and they're both, if you know their writing, I think they're both obvious in my music, and they're obvious on the record.
I love them too. And actually, as I was growing up in college, specifically, because I had been listening to my dad's music because he was
Yeah,
a sax player.
yeah,
And but when I had entered into Berkeley, and I had my own choices, Thad Jones, Mel Lewis, I went to see them live and
yeah,
I just got so blown away. Gil Evans, I mean, and I remember seeing the Mingus band live.
yeah, yeah. That must have been killing. I
Oh
never
my
saw the
God.
Thad Jones band when it was Thad and Mel. I saw it as the Vanguard Monday night band, but I did see the Gil Evans Orchestra in New York at 7th Avenue South in about 83. I think it was the summer of 83, and that was a treat. That band was amazing. I don't remember who all was playing, but I remember that Sanborn was playing alto. Hiram Bullock was playing guitar. It was just
Uh,
absolutely killing.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's really incredible listening to that.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. The colors, the colors in the jazz orchestra kind of started with Duke in a way, and
Yeah.
Thad took the high tension voicing thing forward, and Gil Evans developed the orchestral colors, which has led to all of us learning from him, and all of us learning the importance of going back and listening to classical music and listening to the orchestral colors and listening to the Impressionists, to Ravel and Debussy, and listening to the Spanish classical composers and all this other stuff, because that's where the orchestral colors come
Yeah.
from,
Yeah.
and that's important. I have a piece I'm just finished right now for the next album that has influences of that I'm going to kind of leave as a secret at the moment, but it's fun.
Yeah. Hey, let's listen. I was telling Geoff, as some of you regular people listening know, that when I play, when I don't play live videos of people, YouTube usually takes it down because they don't know that I actually have the person on.
Yeah. Well, maybe
Sure.
there's some way that, I don't know, with me, that I could clear it for you. I don't know how to do that, but it'd be a
Uh,
pity if this got taken down because
yeah.
you didn't have permission to use my music, because I hereby give you permission to use my music.
See that, YouTube? Did you hear that?
Yeah. Listen to that.
Let us go and listen. So, let's see. So, what shall we listen to?
Well, why don't you play that 1 minute clip of Blue Note?
Okay.
That is, it's just shot with an iPhone standing in the studio, so you can't hear the rhythm section very well, but you get a feeling of what this band, the current band, sounds like playing a traditional big band piece, playing a swing piece, because we play all this other stuff too. But if you play that little clip, the one with the purple lights there,
Yeah.
that gives us like a feel of the swing of the band that's coming from every single person, their feeling of time and their feeling
Yeah.
of rhythm.
Okay. Here we go. Wait a minute. I have to start at the beginning. Okay.
So maybe you can find the complete version of Blue Note from the album and just for the first few seconds, so people can hear it with the rhythm section. You sort of hear how it fits together. That, I think, was probably a very early take, because I can tell people are still getting warmed up and missing notes or stuff. That's probably us still getting a level on the microphones, is my guess.
Yeah. Here it is. Here it is, I think. Yeah. Nice. You know, Adam is such a great player.
Yeah. That last chord,
Yeah.
that last chord, to me, when I hear it, just screams Thad Jones. It ends on this weird chord. It's not the 1 or the 4 or the 5 or anything else predictable. Just ends on this weird chord. It's just
Okay, wait a minute. I just gotta play that last chord again. Because I need to, let's see. Okay.
What's weird is that, so I was trying to write kind of a 50s tune that you might have heard with trumpet and tenor on an old Blue Note album in the 50s, right? But blow it up into a more modern thing. And one thing I almost always do is I always have harmonic development through the piece. So you're not going to see the same chord changes in chorus 1 that you're going to see in 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's all this constant development where, everything else is developing. Why should you see the same chords on the page every single chorus? So as that is developing and the tune's getting more modern and all this stuff, we have this very kind of 50s, just blues scale kind of thing. That's in C. The intro and the shout chorus are not in C minor. They're in F minor. So there's just kind of this little modulation that happens a couple times fairly seamlessly. So we're in C minor for the last A section, and there's this funny little lick that almost sounds like it might have been an F minor, and it ends on an E7 altered. So an E7 chord in the key of C minor. What is that? Well, it sounds like a weird kind of 5 chord in F minor. Hard to explain, but somehow it does, and it makes sense. It's one of those,
One of those cool things.
one of those magic things of modern harmony.
Okay, Taylor has a bunch of questions, but one good question I'm taking, Taylor, is let's see. Oh, well, first of all, he's commenting on Russ Garcia, like his work on scores like Time Machine and his big band records from the 50s and 60s. You probably
I know a lot of that stuff. In fact, I knew Russ and I worked with him.
Oh, okay.
And I had his book. I mean, at one point or another, I've owned most of the books on big band writing. I had Russ's book. Some of his stuff didn't really apply to me because Russ was kind of a modernist in the 50s and 60s, and modernity in jazz band writing then might have been polytonality or atonality or serialism or something. And so by the time I came on, I was really, 70s. I wouldn't say those things were done, but they were a little bit passé, and there were other things that were at the forefront of modernity in the modern jazz. But I know all that. I don't know all that. I know a lot of the 50s and 60s, Kenton and the other albums, and the third stream stuff, and that's still. I mean, there's echoes of that in everything we do. Where there's a bitonal chord here, there's just a weird melody there that's not actually serial, but could have come from that. But I knew Russ. I used to work with him. He was a great dude. He was one of the most brilliant couple of composers, arrangers I've ever known. It was just he was absolutely mind-boggling. He was so brilliant.
Wow.
He could write a whole album of arrangements in his head. And then all he had to do was sit down and write them all on paper. I mean, everything.
Wow.
Yeah. And he was a hoot. He was a hoot too. He had a great zany sense of humor. My kind of guy.
That's great.
He was a nut. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. Okay, and he says, this is a real Taylor question. What has been a huge piece of advice given to you that took you years to understand until you finally got it.
Wow, that is a good one. Ooh, boy, you could write a book on that. But I presume he means in arranging or something. Um,
Yeah, I mean, it does, I think knowing him, it could be anything, but
um, these all go hand in hand. And these are especially about writing for other people, because most of what we do as a writer is writing for other people.
yeah,
The first third of it is keep your ego in check. The second third of it is always be in a good mood and be positive and be happy and be happy to be on the gig. And the third part of it is work very hard to find out and understand what the client actually wants. It's easy to think you know and be wrong,
yeah,
you know. And a large reason for that is language is a terrible way to try to explain music.
yeah, yeah,
And you know, now I go off into the ether a little bit. I think this is because music exists in us, and you know, this is maybe the kind of thing you and I might talk about off camera. Music exists in us and exists in our psyche in this higher place above language. So for us to try to put it into words and talk about it, we have to kind of simplify it and pull it down into a way that we can explain it.
yeah,
So when somebody who perhaps is not as eloquent in music vocabulary tries to talk to you, they're doing their best they can to try to tell you what they want from your arrangement.
yeah,
But it's very hard to figure out what they mean from that,
yeah, yeah,
right? So you have to, you know, remember, keep your ego in check, be nice, be happy to be working on it, and try to understand what they're trying to explain,
yeah,
you
yeah,
know? Because most of the time as an arranger, composer, orchestrator, you're working for somebody else.
yeah, yeah,
And in fact, that's how you're going to pay your bills.
yeah, yeah. I've always known that, I mean, if you're writing for TV, movies, etc., that, I mean, so many, I've heard so many stories like, oh my God, they're driving you crazy. And maybe that's part of the reason because you didn't get it in the first place, or
Well,
that they just changed their
it's
mind.
hard to understand. I mean, I'll give you a concrete one. So in the fall of '93, I started working on the Golden Globe Awards as an arranger. And then I always did a lot of the sequencing and the putting sounds together because there were never a tremendous amount of musicians. Since '93, the show has always been pre-recorded. It's always held at the Beverly Hilton. There's no room for a band or an orchestra there. Um, and then after 25 years, I took over the show in 1919. So since then, I've grown with the show, and I helped the previous music director, Lenny Stack, um, figure out how to continually modernize the show and bring it forward as life is moving on. And then I've tried to continue to do the same thing. Well, this last show, the one that was in January, I started in November, and I had a couple of Zoom calls with producers, and we were trying to figure out, it was new producers, new director, trying to figure out what they wanted to do with the show, how they were going to put their stamp on it. We talked about all these things. And I sent in some examples of music I'd done from the last couple of years that I thought might fit kind of their concept going forward. And I heard back from one of the producers, and he said, I like this piece and this piece and this piece best. And I think there needs to be less horns and more bass. Okay, so what does that mean?
Yeah, not
Well,
sure.
I'm gonna go backwards. I listened to it, and I listened to all these pieces, and I thought about everything we talked about on the Zoom calls. I thought about sort of this continued move forward in progress. And I thought the more bass means, it just needs to be more groove oriented.
Yeah,
Right? It needs to be more groove oriented. And the less horns means the horns in quotations. So our jazz and pop meaning of horns, not our orchestral meaning of horns, which means
right.
French horns. But by less horns, he means they shouldn't be as big and loud and playing as many melodies. There should be more space.
Yeah, yeah,
Right? So that, I distilled that down to writing a more groove-based music where the horns were not playing as much melodies, and they were playing more like they were playing more like horn parts on a pop record, but there was no melody. So
Yeah,
there was space, right? So for me, this is a good example of what do you say? More bass, less horns. Okay, great. What does it mean?
yeah. Is that what it meant?
It was.
Yep.
Yep. Worked.
Yeah, yeah,
It
yeah,
worked.
yeah.
The show sounded, by removing the melodies and also removing a bunch of other things and retooling the rhythm section and changing things a bit, the show was vastly more current.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. So it's often hard to figure out what people want or what they say they want. And if you got it wrong and you need to rewrite it, remember number 1 and 2, check your ego and stay in a good mood. And those are hard.
Yeah.
Those are really hard.
Um, are there ideas that you have now? Like you said, every song has something you've never done before. That's what
Yeah.
it's a
Uh-huh.
personal commitment. Do
Yeah.
you have a list of that, like
I don't.
ready to work
No.
on? So
No,
it's
I don't.
it happens at
It
the
comes
last.
it comes up all the time. Like the woodwind players each play 3 or 4 instruments in the band.
Yeah.
So they each play a saxophone and 2 and a flute or a clarinet or something. But I try to limit it for 3 or 4. That's kind of a lot for them to bring to rehearsals or bring to a gig. But the first alto player, the first woodwind player, Alex Budman, does not play clarinet in the band, but he's an absolute virtuoso clarinet player. It's crazy. So one day I said to him, Alex, I know you don't play clarinet in the band, but if I promise not to program it all the time, could I write you a clarinet feature?
Yeah.
And he says, sure. Now I already had an idea for it, which I'm getting to. So I said, I'm thinking of doing kind of a Latin 7/8 with a 2/2/3 subdivision, He says, yeah, I like that. I said, are you comfortable improvising over that? So he said, sure. So my idea was there's a kind of harmony that comes out of film music, and particular neo-noir. Film noir was a movement in kind of the 40s and 50s of, came out of French cinema. It's a sort of a darker, grittier. These are a lot of the sort of private eye crime flicks, French and American and other things from the 40s and 50s. And then it came back again in the 70s in what's called neo-noir. And there's a vocabulary in neo-noir, harmonic vocabulary in neo-noir, that for me started with probably Alex North's score on Streetcar Named Desire, and then also the score to Body Heat, and then you hear it in Chinatown. Well, not so much in Chinatown, but in a lot of other films. Basic Instinct, the vocabulary is used by Jerry Goldsmith in there, and then it came to be used in the Batman movies until it was almost worn out and producers started to not like it anymore. But I wanted to write a big band piece using this neo-noir harmony concept, which I've never heard done. And the thing about the neo-noir harmony is there's no root movement in fourths and fifths. There's nothing that helps tie you emotionally to a key. It's meandering all the time, and the root movements are all by thirds, major or minor in either direction, and almost all the chords are minor.
Huh.
So that was what I did on Bateau Noir. I wrote this piece for Alex. If you listen to it, it's almost all minor chords. It's almost all in 7/8, and most of the root movement is by thirds, and it stays relatively unsettled emotionally, like a film score.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So that's something I'd never done before. And then I tried to find ways, within there to do things. I ended up finding a little arranging device in there that I'd heard on Henry Mancini's score to Hatari decades ago. I never thought about it, and I came upon it and I went, oh my God, that's what Mancini did in a tune in Hatari. And that's in there. It's this funny little chromatic counter moving thing in the low harmony. I had never used that before.
That sounds exciting.
Yeah, so that was fun. We recorded it. We hardly ever play it live because it's really hard. It's really hard.
Wow, maybe we'll listen after,
Yeah.
Here's Taylor. In deeper
Come on,
meaning,
somebody else has got to have a question. Come on.
well, Taylor's question, he has a
No,
lot.
I'm fine. I'm just teasing. You know me. I do that all the time.
Okay, in deeper mean, and I always like to say that it's his, not my question. I don't want to appear like, oh yeah, I have this.
You don't want to you don't want to pretend what you do. You know what you're knowing or what you know you're doing or what?
Yeah, right. I'm deep, but I'm not that deep. No. Um, in deeper meaning, what do you do to avoid feeling all types of confusion of how the music industry can be in this day and age? In what ways do you remind yourself to keep afloat with how music artistically is represented?
Wow.
Great.
Um,
Two questions.
part of that goes to survival
Yeah,
because if you want to live in a big tough scene like this,
yeah,
I mean, music business, this is a tough city. And it attracts a lot of virtuosos. And if you move here, it's going to take you a while to get your footing.
yeah,
And that was certainly the case for me. And I've been here 40 years, and that was probably the case for the first 25 years or something. So part of that was my figuring out how to survive while I keep working on my music, while I keep working on my skills,
yeah,
learning to orchestrate better, to compose better, to arrange better, to play better, to communicate better, right?
yeah,
Um, so I ended up doing, almost everything I can think of in the music business to survive here. I've done cartage. I've worked as a music copyist. I've done arranging, composing, producing, contracting, music director, piano, synth programming. I had 20 years where I had a consulting business, 10 years of it part-time for Korg, 10 years of it part-time for Yamaha. So these were all things to keep me afloat so I could stay here and keep working on my skills and also work on my synth programming skills and my technology skills. Because if you're going to write music today, you better have some technology chops. So the business is tough. It's frustrating. For me, what I have to do in this world of my working mostly for other people is I have to keep writing my own music. And I have to keep playing my own music some way or another, you know?
yeah,
And that's really the big thing is I have to keep writing. For me, writing is a greater outlet than playing. And I realized that before I moved here. I moved here in 84, and it was probably 83 or 82 or something. I mean, I was spending a lot of time writing and playing. And I know one day I was trying to figure out if I was going to make a decision about priorities, I guess. And I asked myself what I would rather do all day. Would I rather write all day or would I rather practice all day? And it was the simple answer, I would rather write all day, just for
yeah,
me,
yeah,
right? So that answered it for me. So
yeah,
I don't want to not play, but I knew coming here and my plan coming here 40 years ago was I was going to write. And hopefully I was going to write for TV and film. I haven't done a lot of composing for TV and film. I do some, but I've done a lot of other things and worked for a heck of a lot of great composers,
yeah.
and that's
So
satisfying too.
when you're writing, I, uh, do you write a song first and then build the arrangement, or do you actually start with an arrangement, or is it kind of a both thing?
There you go. You just came up with an A++ question. That is a great one because for a long time I wrote a song first. So I would sit down at the piano and I would write the tune and then I would figure out how I'm going to arrange it. And I started, I don't know, probably 30 years ago or something, trying to compose like you're improvising a solo. Well, so trying to live in the space of spontaneous creation and no judgment and just find some way to write stream of consciousness. And I worked on it. I was not good at it for a long time, but now I do that a lot. I do still sometimes write the tune like Blue Note, I started by writing a snippet of the tune, and then pretty soon I sat down at Sibelius and started writing it in Sibelius and pushing the boundary out. And something I learned from Russ Garcia, and this is really great, is when you're trying to write a melody, you're trying to get a melody on the page, don't worry if you don't know all the notes. Put the shape on there. So like some of those lines in Blue Note, I might just have gone to la da 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 da, and then go back and figure out what the pitches are, but at least you're not getting hung up on the notes while you have this idea of kind of a shape of something, And so I switched back and forth between kind of the spontaneous creation of trying to do a kind of a spiritual brain dump onto the page and going back and editing and rewriting and just pushing the end of it out and out. And the great thing about writing in the computer is you can move things around. Like I just finished a piece last week that I had written as a song for a small group. I had never performed it. I had never played it with anybody. I'd been sitting on the piano for a few years, but it's really good. And I looked at it, I said, you know what? This I think would make a Stradband piece. And it was sitting there on Sibelius for probably working on it for a month or something, maybe 6 weeks. That wasn't the only thing I was doing, but I just kept coming back and hammering at it. I finished it and it was over 12 minutes long. It was like 12 minutes and 30 long or something. Well, that ain't gonna fly.
Yeah.
So not even live. So I went back and did 2 rewrites. One, I got it down to 8 something, and then another one, I got it down to 7 something. And I was able to take things out and move them around, in whole. This is really good, but this shouldn't be the trumpet solo. This should be a saxophone. And so that is so much easier than paper. And then that's using the editing brain rather than the straight creative brain. I do still sometimes write a quote unquote song. Sometimes I don't. Like Brecker Sketch, the second piece on the album, after Michael Brecker died, and I'd been listening to him almost my entire life, I'd thought about writing a memorial to him, and the kind of the critical brain said, nah, there's going to be a million of those, And then a couple of years went by, and I was still thinking about it. I didn't have an idea. One day I sat down at the piano and boom, out it came. Yeah. So I probably had the first 20 bars writing it in pencil on the piano. And I said, okay, I got to start. I better move over to Sibelius and start putting it in there. So then that piece was through composed like that. I did not finish it. There is no song form to it. There are things I do in through composed that help to give it form and shape.
Yeah.
Like deciding this is a cool idea for the solo section. I'm not going to use it in its entirety, but I'm going to use that idea for this solo section later on. And oh, guess what? This feels like it should be in G minor, right? So I do that. The sort of Miles Davis, Gil Evans piece, Here in Spirit, that was written entirely stream of consciousness at Sibelius. I started at the beginning with these 2 chords. And I just sat down and I started writing this piece, trying to evoke kind of a feeling of our musical ancestors, our masters that we have followed, and that feeling when you listen to a beautiful record, like let's say Sketches of Spain, when you put it on, you're listening to it. If it's really a truly brilliant and committed performance, it can feel like those people are in the room with you.
Yeah.
Sometimes, right? And that's why it's called Here in Spirit. So just trying to evoke that feeling of kind of, kind of the people on whose shoulders we're standing, and get some of that old Gil and Miles feeling, but yet with my more modern harmonic vocabulary and newer tone colors and things,
Yeah. Yeah, the question of writing is really interesting. Yeah, I mean, I've written a lot of songs, and they've come out in different ways. And there was one particular point where I stopped for a year because what I was writing was folky, and I thought, well, it's not jazzy, And I stopped. And then a year later, I said, well, what was I doing? What was I thinking? I could throw it away. I don't have to you don't stop the creative process, right? Which is
Well, you
kind of,
don't also only have to write for yourself. They might be
yeah,
great folk songs.
right.
I've written a country tune or two.
Yeah,
They haven't been recorded, but they're decent tunes.
yeah,
I've written like a couple of new age tunes with a singer in Nashville. One of them got recorded and is quite good.
yeah,
I have a friend, Michael Peterson, who's a big country star, and we both adore each other. And we've been trying to find sort of this place where we're going to meet. We've toyed with some things, and I just sent him my new album a couple of weeks ago, and he loves it. Actually, it showed up on his birthday, which was just a nice, happy accident birthday present. you know. So, I go back to my upbringing with all that music in the
yeah.
house. I remember when Carole King's Tapestry showed up in the mail because my mom was a member of the Columbia Record Club. People that don't
Yeah.
remember, right? The record companies would have a record club, and you could join, and once a month in your category you had picked, they would select a record and they would mail it to you, and you would get a bill and you'd pay for it. Some of the times we didn't like it, we turned it in, but I can't tell you the stuff that showed up there that influenced me.
Yeah.
The Carole King Tapestry showed up there, and also a Paul Butterfield blues band album. The sax player was David Sanborn. That was the first time I ever heard him.
I didn't know
Right?
that. I used to listen to that. Yeah.
Before he played with Stevie Wonder, he was in the Paul Butterfield Blues Band. The next time I heard him was on Stevie's Tuesday Heartbreak. I listened to that. I know who that is. That's the guy from Paul Butterfield Blues Band. So, it's best to be an omnivore musically, and to check your judgment at the door.
Yeah.
There's lots of great stuff out there.
Yeah. Yeah. In Boston, Boston in college years was like a real delicious gumbo.
Yeah, I bet it was.
Yeah, it was
I
incredible.
regret going there, although on the other hand, I got a unique education.
Yeah.
Going to Westminster for 3 semesters, going back to Seattle and scuffling and doing poorly, going to Europe and, having to learn a new language with no school, and learning about food and wine, and flying to Milan to play record dates. It was a completely different education.
Yeah.
Have
you gone back to Germany in recent years, or?
Not in recent years. The last time I was back was about 25 years ago.
Oh.
Been gone for 40. So I'm due, and I have friends I'd like to see while we're all still alive, while we're still vertical, as I say.
In Munich?
I have friends in Munich. I have a friend in Milan I'd like to see. He was a record producer I used to work for.
Yeah.
Here, my friends from Munich are in Cologne. I'd like to go see them. I have another friend in Cologne I'd like to see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's time for a trip, Geoff.
It is time for a trip. Mimi and I've been talking about that. We also have a standing invitation for pizza in a friend of mine's backyard in Ancona. So we're going to have to go for that. He's got a pizza oven, and I've had him. He's Italian. I've had him over for pizza twice here in LA. So we're due. We're overdue. First time he came over to dinner, I said, I met him at the door. I said, I want you to know I'm very brave. And he looked at me. His English is good enough. You know what I said? I said, I'm making pizza tonight. He says, that's great.
Right, making pizza for an Italian.
Yep.
So let's see. Is there can we listen to Baton Noir a little?
Yeah, why don't you listen to a little bit of that? But listen to like a minute of that, and then why don't you jump over and listen to a minute of Rap Party? Because Rap Party is a completely different thing, and I'll tell you about it.
Okay.
So get into Baton Noir until you maybe get through the head and up and into the clarinet solo, and then we'll drop and I'll tell you about Rap Party, because every piece in the album has a totally different story.
Okay. Baton Noir. So this, if you remember,
baton is a stick, like the baton you conduct with,
right.
And noir is black. So that's what a clarinet is. It's a black stick.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay, so did you want me to go to something else?
Yeah.
Or, okay. So, wow, that was beautiful. Okay,
So
so,
then it goes to this development section where it goes down to absolutely nothing. It's just the rhythm section. And little by little, I bring back in the themes from the thing and weave them together into this new kind of tapestry and go to a modulation. Then we're out to the recap of the head and out to the ending.
oh, okay.
Okay, so I'll tell you a little bit about Rap Party. So as I said, I'm trying to sort of integrate all these different things into the jazz orchestra. When Miles Davis abandoned acoustic jazz and went to an electric band and sort of invented fusion, jazz was changed forever.
Yeah.
And a lot of the forward thinkers of the next decades came out of Miles' band, and they were influenced by that. You know, Keith Jarrett played with him, Chick Corea played with him, Joe Zawinul, Wayne Shorter, the list goes on and on and on and on. So Joe Zawinul and Wayne Shorter split off, started their own band, Weather Report, which was another highly influential thing where it brought in more world music and West African musicians and all these things. So I wanted to take something that came out of that whole history and that thread of modern jazz and find a way to write it for the modern jazz orchestra.
Yeah.
With that whole flavor, with the electronics, with the electric trumpet, with the African influences, with the funk bass. So this is Rap Party. Play a piece of it as far as you want to go.
Okay.
trumpet.
Nice. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, it has a lot of the weather report thing, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
yeah,
really cool.
yeah. That was that. that took some work to figure out how to do that. I mean, obviously, I knew Weather Report, loved them. I saw them in the heyday
Yeah.
with Jocko and Peter Erskine, and then I saw Domino Syndicate a couple times, and went back and listened to, when I started working this, I went back and listened to Jaco Pastorius big band, particularly Liberty City, and I got a couple ideas off of that. This one I wrote, I quote unquote wrote part of the tune first. This is the A part is that A minor vamp. That there's an acapella intro of just the horns. I got that idea from Liberty City, but I wrote my own. And then this one chord vamp comes in. That's kind of the A section, right?
Yeah.
Then the B section is kind of look like a hooky pop chorus, except it keeps changing keys. And then the C section is right that. So I wrote the B section and C section first for something else.
Yeah.
For paying project. And I thought, that's really good. I'm going to turn that into something, but how do I take that and turn that into a big band piece? First of all, I need another section, and I knew stylistically what it was. I know it was kind of a weather reporty thing, but how do I write a weather reporty or more modern big band piece using all these elements? So I put the A minor section on the front of it, and then figured out how to sort of, little by little. This was during the pandemic, so I had unlimited time.
Yeah. Yeah, it's cool. And when it's kind of walking along,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, there's two walking things. There's the chorus part, the beep 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 doo 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 doo. That's like 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4. But the bass is walking half time, right? Boom, doo, doo.
Yeah.
And the chords are moving half time, the whole time. And harmonically, with the exception of the A minor piece of the tune, the B part and the C part are all a 3-note voicing over a root. And they're not necessarily an obvious chord per se. So the bip, 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 that is 3 notes over a root moving. Everything's moving in half notes. And then the ba, 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 that's also a 3-note chord over a root moving. Not necessarily obvious chords. And when you want someone to solo on it, then you have to decide what you're going to call the chords.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, let me just say it's been 2 hours, and it's fun, isn't it? It's fun to talk.
Fun.
Yeah, it's great.
You asked me before, but I was working on this project and I didn't feel like I had something, in the jazz world enough. The last years I've been working so much in TV and film and video game, didn't have something in the jazz world enough that I really wanted to put out there and talk about. This album's been out since April. It's got some nice press, a couple of great reviews for people that are interested in it. It's on virtually every service. If you are in the US and you still have something that plays CDs and you would like a CD, you can go on my website, geoffstradling.com, and order a CD on the shopping page, and I will mail you one. If you would rather buy a download, you can buy it from me, and those are on the same page. I have it in CD quality download, which is 1644, and I also have it in the higher pro audio resolution that we worked in 24-bit 48K for $5 more. With both of those, I made a PDF liner notes packet that you get with it. So you get to see all the photos and the complete liner notes and everybody who played everything and everything I had to say about the album. And then my friend Don Brydup, who's a brilliant songwriter, wrote just wonderful kind of 50s or 60s style liner notes, kind of observation, a little bit Leonard Feathery. They were talking about the music in an educated but not intellectual way. So there's all that. Also have 2 books on the same page. I also have 2 books I wrote on piano during the pandemic. I have a couple of existing big band pieces that I wrote for Wayne Bergeron, Samba Brasileiro, and Scheherazade that are on there. A couple of classical pieces I wrote that are on there. I'm in the process of publishing probably everything from this album. They will all the big band pieces will be on there, with the possible exception of Poinciana. I don't know if we can get a license for it yet. Those will also be co-published by, I think it's called jazzeducation.org or something like that. It's Gene Aiken's organization. So they'll be there. And you'll see there's also a merch page linked to, there's, you got to have merch these days. So there's t-shirts, there's caps, and there's lined hoodies. You can also contact me through the page. There's a contact me, it'll send me an email. Love to hear from any of you. I'm also active on social media. I'm on Facebook under my name, Geoff Stradling, and I'm on Twitter/X as Stradlevarious, like Stradivarius, but Stradlevarious.
Okay.
This has been fun. I've wanted to do it for a long time. I just felt like I needed to have a large enough pie to set on the table to talk about.
Well, I kind of suspect you'll always have a large enough pie, but anyway.
Well, I'm
thanks.
writing on the next one. I just have to figure out how to finance it, which is what I had to do in this one. But
And do you know, is there another gig coming up?
I'm trying to book something. I'm trying to get back into the write-off room, and so many of my friends with bands have been playing at the Baked Potato. I decided we should do that too. So I just shot a text over there. I haven't heard from him. Andrew Sinovic, the guitar player who plays there, suggests that I just go over on a slow night and talk to him. So
Yeah.
I'll probably do that. That's all. I'm in the valley. They're in the valley, and the write-off room is in the valley. So yeah, we'll be out playing more.
Yeah.
Like I said, there's also a couple of good reviews. There's a good review on Jazz Weekly, and there's a 4.5-star review on All About Jazz from Jack Bowers. It's a very nice write-up. And what else? I have a YouTube channel. There's some jazzy stuff. There's I made videos of all 13 pieces in the second piano book. So if you're interested in playing those, but they're hard to read for you, you can see what they sound like. I shot live videos of me performing them on there. And then during the pandemic, I did a 24-episode web series called Multi-Geek, where every episode is about some of the different stuff that interests me, whether it's birds or cooking or whatever. So that was just kind of a fun way to spend the time.
I didn't know about that. That sounds fun.
Yeah. Well, it's very me, as you'll discover.
Okay, well, thanks.
Thank you, Cathy. It's been a lot of fun.
It was really fun. Thank you for being on.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Everybody, next week, I'm doing Mondays now. So there's a really great pianist on the East Coast who's worked with a lot of my friends, John DiMartino. And so he's going to be on next week from New York. Yeah. Okay.
See ya.
Adios, everybody.